Hi everyone, it's Kute here, sending you big love wherever you are around the world. In today's short video, I want to talk about how do you stop suffering and give up a constant sense of struggling through life. If we're not careful, suffering and struggling and suffering and struggling and this sense of hardship through life can become addictive. It can become a false way to feel alive. And many times, many of us, myself included, there was a period in my life where I was so addicted to struggling. I was so addicted to suffering. I would wear suffering and struggle, and the harder it was, I would wear it like a badge of honor, like a sign of how spiritual I was, a sign of how good I was, a sign of my own enoughness. Because if I struggled enough, if I worked hard enough, if I suffered enough and I made it, then it proved that I was enough. And so often we're taught this idea that in life you have to suffer, and life is suffering. You know, I think it was the Buddha that said life is suffering. I believe that's not accurate. Life itself isn't suffering. Life just is. We have to be willing to give up the paradigm, to give up the illusion, the illusory belief. It's just a belief, it's not reality, that life is suffering. Life just is what it is. And experiences are just what they are. And people are simply what they are. But what creates our suffering and as a result creates our struggle are a few things. First thing that creates our suffering is in response to experiences, in response to life, in response to simply what is. There is reality, there is what is happening, there is the moment, there is the situation, there is what is reality, and then there is the story, the perception, the interpretation that we add to what's happening that creates a meaning, that creates our reality, not necessarily the reality. I mean, how many times have you made up a story about a situation and made it mean something that it absolutely wasn't, and then you couldn't see that that's what you were doing, and that became your reality, and it was horrible suffering and struggle. And then what we end up doing, so there's what is, and then there's the story that we add, the story that we make up about what is happening, and that creates our suffering. And then there's the story that we make up about ourselves. A certain thing happens, someone says no, we get rejected in a relationship, and we make that mean I'm not enough. We make that mean God doesn't love me. We make that mean, you know, I'll never make it, I'm not successful. We make that mean all kinds of things that then create suffering inside of ourselves. To go beyond suffering, we first have to take responsibility. You first have to take responsibility for your own emotional state, realizing that nothing outside of yourself has the power. Nothing outside of yourself has power over you unless you give it to experiences, people, and events. When you reclaim your power in this way, you take a responsibility for your own inner state of being. This responsibility for your own inner state of being is power. Where you realize my inner state of being is not at the mercy. I am not a slave. You are not a slave to what's out there. Many times we're a slave to what's out there, and as a result, life controls us. So this is the first thing I would say. The other thing that I found creates suffering really arises, at least at the root, is we are often disconnected from who we really are. We're born free, we're born in this sort of awakened, enlightened state as children, right? You look into a child's eyes, a child is free, and we slowly, through the conditioning of life, through pain, through trauma, through media, through society, through all sorts of experiences that we've all gone through, slowly we start disconnecting from who we are. And so much of our media and our culture is constantly conditioning us and distracting you from who you really are. And we're being sold and hypnotized and seduced this idea that you are not enough. You are not enough. You're a sinner. You're not enough. You're bad. You're not enough. And as children, we're often told that we're not enough, so often that we start believing the illusion of who we are. We forget that what we are is whole, perfect, and complete. We forget that what we are at the depth of our being is life force itself. In a sense, at the depth of our being, we are soul, we are consciousness, we are divine, we are a manifestation of the infinite. We start buying into the lies and the untruth and the illusion that we are just our conditioning, we are just our story, we are simply what our parents and our grandparents and those that raised us, we are simply what they believed us to be, and sometimes what they believed you to be, right, may not have been that enlightened, that awakened, that empowering or inspiring. Maybe you were told you're not enough. Maybe you were told you'll never amount to anything. These are just labels and stories and concepts. It's not reality. And so what often happens from a very young age, we disconnect from who we really are. And because we feel we're not enough, we begin to seek outside of ourselves to try and reclaim, regain, reconnect with our source of aliveness. We try and reconnect, like if I can attain success out there, if I can get people to like me out there, if I can become something out there, if I can attain the house, the car, something material outside of myself, maybe then I'll finally be enough. So the seeking begins. And in that seeking for a sense of who we are outside, which you will never find, and even if you attain certain things out here in the world, like have you ever attained something in the world that you really thought was going to be the answer was going to be the end to your suffering? If I can finally get that relationship, if I can finally, write the book, if I can finally make a certain amount of money, then I'll be enough. Then I won't suffer anymore. This will be the end of my suffering. And you realize when you attain that thing, at some point you hit a point of dissatisfaction, and it was not the answer. Nothing outside of yourself will make you enough. Nothing outside of yourself can make you enough. Nothing outside of yourself can end your suffering unless you feel and are connected to the source of truth of your own aliveness and enoughness within yourself. You are already enough, my friends. You, at the core of your being, as you listen to this video, as you are engaged with me right now, you, at the core of your being, are already whole, perfect, complete, and enough. So part of suffering arises because we're seeking for what we already are outside. And if you haven't noticed, anything in the world is transitory. Everything in the world is temporary. Everything in the world is impermanent. So then when we attach to something out here, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a car, whether it's a job, all of these things are constantly changing. Nothing lasts forever. So then our sense of enoughness, our sense of self, our sense of confidence, if your sense of being is identified with and attached to something outside in the world, and that's what you are depending on for a sense of self, a sense of inner stability, you will likely suffer. You will likely suffer. So realize that nothing outside of you can complete you. Go inside. Unplug yourself from the opinions of others. Unplug yourself from seeking outside and go inside. And when you go inside, through meditation, through breathing, through just taking a moment to remember who you are, remember your spirit, you will connect with a source of aliveness, a source of power, a source of energy that will amaze you. The other thing I'll say is part of why we suffer and part of why we struggle is it comes down to the ways that you resist reality. One of the things that creates struggle, one of the things that creates a sense of suffering is because we are constantly resisting reality. We are constantly trying to control things out here, control people. How does that work, right? Control our children, control our families, control the way people see us. We're constantly resisting what is. When you resist what is happening, when you resist what life, when you resist the experience that's occurring right now, you will suffer. When you resist reality, you suffer. So one of the killer beliefs that is always, I found, is always present when you are in a moment of suffering. Right? When you're in a moment of suffering, and by the way, I believe that suffering is actually an unnecessary part of life. Pain is inevitable, but I believe suffering is unnecessary. Suffering is really based on the story that you are attaching and you are making up, and the emotion that you are bringing to a situation. There's pain and then there's suffering. Suffering is really arising because of the story that you are spinning about what is, about reality. So in a moment of suffering, here's what I'd like you to do. Take a step back and realize, wow, I'm suffering in this moment. In this moment I'm suffering. Likely I'm resisting what's happening. It shouldn't be raining. Life shouldn't be this way. Government shouldn't be this way. My mother shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't be this way. Life shouldn't be this way. God shouldn't be this way. People shouldn't be this way. Just take a look at it and ask yourself, what am I resisting? You will always find in a moment of suffering, you will always find this belief in your mind and in your consciousness. And the belief sounds something like this. The experience that I'm having is not the experience that I should be having. The experience that I'm having is not the experience that I should be having right now. I should be having some other experience than the experience that I'm having right now. Resistance. The only way you can change your reality is not to fight your reality, is not to judge your reality, is not to resist your reality. All that does is create more struggle and suffering. The only way you can change your reality is step one, is to first acknowledge your reality. Step two, you have to accept your reality as it is without judgment. Then you bring yourself into relationship with your reality as it is. Because when you're fighting your reality, when you're judging your reality, you're not in relationship with it. And if you're not in relationship with it, you can't be aware of it. If you're not in relationship with it, you can't really change it. So I believe that you do not have to grow in life through struggle. You go through awareness. Accept what is. Bring yourself into relationship with what is. And then from a place of peacefulness, from a place of neutrality, from a place of calmness, then you can decide what actions you're going to take to change your reality, but not from a place of reactivity, not from a place of internal struggle or suffering. Ultimately, what we are often resisting, and this is the last thing I'll say, what we're often resisting more than anything that I found, we as human beings are resisting our true identity. We as human beings are often resisting the deepest level of truth, that we are an aspect of the divine. We resist. I'm magnificent. No, I'm not. I'm playing big. No, I'm not. I'm divine. No, I'm not. And we're constantly resisting. Ultimately, so much of what we do, our ego, which creates separation, so much of what we do through life, so much of the suffering that we cause ourselves is a form of resisting, fully surrendering to what you really are, which is light, pure consciousness, divine, whatever label you want to put it. You are a manifestation of that. And in that is often scary, because that level of surrender requires that you give up your little sense of self, right? The little sense of ego identification that you might have created to know yourself as yourself, this little small thing. What we're often resisting is the truth of who we are, because it requires a surrender. And what we're often resisting ultimately in our sense of struggle is struggle as human beings, as little egos, gives us, you and I, a false sense of being alive, because we create friction with life. Struggle often gives us a false sense of self. Oh, I feel myself when I struggle, right? I feel myself alive when I struggle. And so we often we are resisting surrendering to what we are. Are you willing to truly let go of struggle? You must be willing, and to truly let go of suffering and struggle, you must be willing to surrender yourself and in that dissolve. We are resisting the void. We are resisting dissolving as a separate person, separate from life, separate from nature, separate from the infinite. We are resisting. My friends, regardless of what's going on in your life, regardless of your experience, my invitation is that you surrender, is that you let go, and you recognize and realize that right now, if you're struggling, right now, if you're contracted, right now, if you're having a tough time struggling through life, realize that there is an intelligence that's breathing you. Realize that just feel your breath in this moment with me watching this video. There is an intelligence that is breathing you. Call it whatever you want, whatever you believe is up to you. But it's undeniable you and I are being lived and breathed by something. Life force, energy. This same intelligence is the same intelligence that is functioning, the sun, the stars, the moon, the ocean, the caterpillars, the dogs and the cats, all species and 7.3 billion people. We are all being lived by that. To recognize that is surrender. And to surrender to being lived by that which is living everything, I feel is the ultimate freedom. And as you do that, all suffering dissolves, all struggle dissolves. You bring yourself into the harmonious flow of life, and life itself begins to move and flow through you, expressed through you as a beautiful work of art. My friends, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I invite you to surrender and let go of struggle and watch miracles occur in your life. If you've enjoyed this video, please do share it with your friends. Like my YouTube page, join me and follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon.